Okay, and here we have our 3 servos. These are Futaba 9252 servos, and as you can see, these are not new servos. These have come out of another machine. I've got a little bit of a break on one of the lugs here, but they're in otherwise very good condition, and will work very well in the 600 ESP. A point to make clear is that this isn't the super combo, so we're not using supplied aligned servos for this. With the 600 ESP, it's just a Super Pro, so you don't get supplied servos, you don't get a gyro, you don't get a tail servo, so you do need to fit your own equipment. So next job is to fit these 3 9252s into the 600 ESP. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to fit the 2 front Cyclic servos, and to do that we use this equipment here, which is these self-tapping screws which go into the already mounted servo mounting tabs that we put into the frames, and then these little carbon brackets which go over the servo lug so that you can tighten these down without worrying about breaking the servo lugs. And in my instance this is very fortunate because I've got one lug that's slightly broken on one of my servos, so this will really help secure that servo in place. Okay, and there we have one of our Cyclic servos installed, and being a 9252, you'll find if you use this servo or a 9255, they're actually too deep to fit in the frames without spacing them away from the frames. So what I've used is one of the little plastic servo mounting tabs. I've got another one here, I can just quickly show you. One of these, oops, dropped it. Yeah, one of those things. I've just used one of those to space the servos away from the frames, and then that stops them from hitting in the middle. So if I just spin this round so you can see, without the spacing that I've got here and here, these servos actually hit in the middle, and you aren't able to tighten up the screws here to hold the servos in place. So just adding those plastic spacers top and bottom, servos are nice and secure, they can't go anywhere, and they now fit in the frames okay, and they're not too wide that they're going to hit the canopy or anything like that. And we're able to mount our balls on the inside of the servo horn here to go back to the ball back here, and it should work fine. Okay, the next job is our elevator servo, and it needs to go in this kind of little mounting box, and then this mounting box is mounted into the frames and the servo is screwed into the box. And the way this thing works is the servo just goes down into the box like so, and you can screw it into the box through those mounting holes there, and then this whole box mounts into the frames to hold the servo in place. So I'll install that and you can have a look and see what that's like. Okay, here we have the elevator servo installed, and what I want to show you is that when you're mounting on this side, you use these much shorter screws to mount the plastic casing around the servo into the frames. If you try and use the long screws, then they basically go down the same hole as you bolted the servo into the plastic frame with, and the 2 screws will hit and bind with one another. So you use these much smaller ones, and then you don't have that problem. Okay, and that's the elevator servo fitted. Okay, next up we're fitting the tail servo. This is a JR 8900G tail servo, and this is fitted using the little plastic bits like this which go behind. They sit behind the servo cradle, and then you bolt through, and again you've got these little carbon parts here that go on the front like that, which you bolt through into the plastic piece on the rear. So I'm going to bolt that into place, and then we're into installing the control rods onto all of the various servos. Okay, so there we have the tail servo bolted into place, and if I just spin this over, bring the camera up slightly. You can see the plastic. Let's bring this up a little bit more, there we go. So you can see the plastic parts on the underside that we've screwed into to hold the servo into place. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is make up the control rods for all the various servo horns, and also put our ball link onto the end here and connect this onto the tail servo. So push rods and connecting up the tail servos next. Okay, so there you have our aileron servo with its push rods installed, and that's kind of how it would be for 0 degrees pitch. The push rod's completely parallel like that. And there's the same the other side. And the other thing I want to show you is the elevator servo. Okay, so you see the elevator servo in there, and we can see our push rods are connected to it. I'll show you a view from the back because it's very difficult to see in there to the push rods. Okay, so there you can see in the back of the machine there, you can see the push rod from the servo going to the elevator control at the front. Now in terms of rod lengths for these, it's going to vary depending on what type of servo you use. I followed the rod lengths in the manual and they were pretty close, and I just needed a little bit of adjustment on the rod side to make them slightly shorter all round to get a good fit onto the control horns and the servos without the rods being under tension. Okay, so from a mechanical perspective, that's actually the build now done. I've now got to route these wires to the receiver, install a gyro on the back up here, put a receiver into the machine and route all the wires, etc, etc. Put my speed controller on the side, mount the battery elimination circuit or the BEC for the battery, and mount the battery into the frames as well. And these are all things that there's no sort of real process to it. I'm going to have to just go ahead and install all the stuff, and then I'll come back and show you it all installed and in place with the wires routed, and you can see how I've laid out the machine in order to do that. Okay, here we have the electronics install completed. I'll just take this step at a time and show you what's where. I've mounted the speed controller down the bottom here on the side of the frames. This has just got a piece of foam sticky, double-sided sticky foam behind it to hold it onto the frames. Then I've lightly put a cable tie around it, and we don't want to do these cable ties up too tight around a speed controller because it can damage it. So it's just there in case the sticky lets go, just to hold that speed controller in place. I've got the BEC at the back here, and again this is just stuck on, and you can see it here, the double-sided sticky foam stuck on with, and I've bundled up some. The receiver is on the shelf here, and then the satellite receiver I've put up the top here a couple of inches away, which is the necessary spacing, and it's at a different orientation to the receiver below. So this one is mounted horizontally with the wires out to the side, and this one is vertically with the wires vertical. You can see the gyro mounted up the back here, and this is actually a Hobby Wing Platinum gyro. I've not used one of these before, so this is a bit of an experiment. So we'll see how well this gyro is going to work. If it doesn't work too well, then I'll swap it over for my usual CSM 720. But we'll find out, and there'll be a review on the site of this gyro fairly soon. This is the test machine for that particular gyro. Down the bottom here, inside the frames, I've got the receiver pack. I was going to mount it up here on this shelf here, but there's not much depth in this shelf here, so it got moved down here. And the other advantage of moving it down below is I can get a Velcro strap around it as well, just to hold it in place. So it's on the double-sided Velcro, stuck down on the Velcro, so it shouldn't come loose, but I like a belt and braces approach, so I'll put a Velcro strap around the end there as well. Whereas when it was up here on the tray, I couldn't get it in very far because the tail gearbox gets in the way, and I couldn't really get a strap around it either to hold it in, so I moved it because I wasn't happy because of that. This is the other side of the frames, and as you can see it's remarkably wire free. I've actually run the wires inside the frames from the front servos, so they kind of go along inside here, and they're strapped in on these cable ties here on the inside of the frames, and then they run down inside here to the receiver at the back, and the same on the other side. So I've run all the wires inside and routed the cables around the gears. So you've got a nice clean side to the frames this side. Unfortunately not the same the other side, and if I had more time I'd probably spend a lot more time tidying up the other side of the model here, particularly this bundle of wires here. I'd probably look at putting this inside here, in this gap here, down in there, and getting it hidden out of the way. But for speed, I've just mounted that on the side there, and it's held with a cable tie, and that should be fine. The only other thing to show you is the ball link is now completed onto the tail servo. So I just turn this around again. Let me just angle this over like that. There we go. You can see the push rod is now on the servo, and I've just set this. That's the neutral point effectively for the servo. The Hobbywing Platinum Gyro requires that the servo is centered and that the tail rotor pitch slider is in the center of its movement as well. But I'll just share with you a tip as well for setting up rate mode gyros that actually require that the rate mode is set. Okay, so this is just a very quick tip for those people who are using something like a CSM 720 gyro, where you have to set the model up to hover in rate mode with the stick at the midpoint. So with your rudder stick centered, you want the model to fly without pirouetting in rate mode. Now to achieve that, you have to set a certain level of pitch on the blades, and I've actually put the slider in the right place now so that there's sort of 4 or 5 degrees of pitch on the blade in order to achieve that rate mode hands-off, hands-free hover. But actually there is a scientific way of setting this particular point on a T-Rex 600, and that is if you set the gap here between the side of the gearbox here and the edge, this edge here, of the tail pitch slider. So if I just slide this in here like that, so you see where that's gone there. If you set that gap there to 8mm, that is the exact setting you need in order to hover in rate mode for something like a CSM 720. So if you set your neutral point of your servo in rate mode on the gyro to put the pitch slider in exactly that position, 8mm out on the tail output shaft, then your model will fly hands off in rate mode without any adjustment. And then you can switch into heading hold mode and do the rest of your gyro setup. So that's just a quick tip for those people who need to set up rate mode on their gyro. Okay, and the one last thing I'm going to show you here is that I've now fitted the Align main blades into the grips and tighten them up. And you want to tighten the main blades up so that if you hold the helicopter on its side, the tightness of the grip needs to be enough to stop the blade falling under its own weight. If it's looser than that, then the blades can fold when you spool up and hit their trailing edges on different parts of the rotor head and damage them. But if you make them a bit stiffer, that stops that effect from happening. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the build video. I'm going to shoot a little tiny bit of video outside to show you the completed model with the canopy on, and I've just got a couple of bits to say about the canopy, but aside from that we're completely done with the both mechanical build and the electrical install, and it's really time to take this machine out and do the maiden flight. Just as a note, I set the machine up with ± 12 degrees of pitch on the rotor head, 0 degrees at mid stick because we're setting this machine up for 3D. I left the speed controller settings at default, and I'm going to run the thing on the supplied pinion, which I think is a 14 tooth pinion, and I'm going to run that at 100% on the speed controller, so flat line 100%, so full whack for 3D flight. If that doesn't give me enough, then I'll use the slightly bigger pinion supplied with the kit, as it comes with 2 pinions, which I think the other pinion is a 15 tooth. Okay, so that's it. The only thing left to show you is the video of the full completed model outside, and then we can go and maiden fly it.